From lie flat seats to mountain peaks and pasta by the sea. I'm kicking off season 2 with a review of my own trip to Europe, where we flew business class from North America to Switzerland. We took the incredible and beautiful Bernina Express and how to do Italy and Switzerland right. Let's wander. Hi friends, I'm Day, your host, travel lover, deal finder, and storyteller. And this is Wander Every Day, the podcast where real talk meets real trips. Each week, I sit down with some of my favorite well-traveled friends to swap stories. We're diving in on where to stay, what to eat, how to spend your time and money, and how to enjoy exploring the world. Now, let's wander. Hi friends, and welcome back to Season 2, Episode 1 of Wander Every Day. For those that are new here, I'm Day, and I'm here interviewing my friends each episode to tell you everything you need to know about traveling to certain destinations worldwide. Tips, tricks, highlights, hidden gems, what's worth seeing, what maybe you should avoid, and so much more. On our first episode back for Season 2, I'm going to briefly review my own trip that I took with my husband, Nick, this past September to Switzerland on the Bernina Express and then into Italy, specifically Lake Como. I'll also quickly review, very briefly, because we reviewed in past episodes, our trip to Ischia and Naples, as well as some other tips and tricks we've learned along the way. But first, before we jump into my trip review, there is a few things I want to talk about super quickly, and one of them is what I've been up to the last 3 months since I haven't done the pod. When I took a break from the podcast when we left for our trip in the middle of September, I had every intention of returning to the podcast before the end of the fall. However, there was one big life change that occurred, and that was the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays made it to the World Series. Anyone who knows me personally knows that I am a huge sports fan, and if the fall isn't busy enough with fantasy football because we watch a lot of NFL, we at least hope that October will be kind of busy watching the Toronto Blue Jays, and this year absolutely did not disappoint. In fact, we were lucky enough that when the tickets went on sale for the World Series, we were able to get Game 7 tickets, and we actually got to go ourselves, which, for anyone who knows the outcome of that game, was the most incredible experience, specifically sporting experience of a lifetime, but obviously quite disappointing. After the Toronto Blue Jays lost in the World Series, we took a bit of a break from everything, and in the middle of November, I started to get back into planning for Season 2 of the podcast. At that point, I had people who were messaging me daily or every other day who were communicating to me that they wanted the podcast back. They were curious when episodes were coming out. I was having people asking me recommendations. I was having people I'd never met messaging me, asking me questions. I had people who were guests on the podcast getting messages from people who were listening to episodes. So I knew that people were watching, but as of the middle of September, I completely disengaged from the podcast. I hadn't been posting episodes. I hadn't been on social media. I hadn't been looking at any of the stats through Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And it wasn't until the end of November that I realized just how much of an impact the podcast has had. What I thought would be basically radio silence in terms of listenership ended up being hundreds of listens still going on each week. I was able to see the Spotify Wrap stats that came out last week, where it's really the first opportunity you have to see your analytics in comparison to other podcasts. And Wander Every Day is within the top 20% most watched video podcasts on Spotify. We're in the top 93% shared podcasts on Spotify, and in the top 85% best performing season 1 podcasts on Spotify. And I thought that was crazy. Now I can see some of the stats. I know people are listening. I have thousands of listens on the podcast. We're in 25 countries. I know we're making a difference, but oh my goodness, does seeing those statistics just motivate me more and more to provide content for our listeners that's purposeful, meaningful, useful. And I really, really hope that Season 2 of the podcast, we can continue to provide this type of information, because all I want is for our listeners to have the best trip possible. With that being said, guys, if there's anything you want me to review on the podcast, any locations, any different type of trip styles, please send me a message on Wander Everyday Pod on Instagram. Also, I'm going to take this moment to tell everyone, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Wander Everyday Pod. I'm going to try and be a bit more active on social media this season. I think there are certain tips that are provided in each episode of the podcast that could be a bit easily or more easily digested as a reel or in short form content. I'm not someone who would say is fantastic at creating short form content. Just because I'm a millennial doesn't mean I actually spend a lot of time on social media. I actually don't even use TikTok personally, but I'm trying to become more familiar with it and use it more effectively, more as like an outreach so that people who are looking for this type of content can find the podcast. Without further ado, let me jump in to a review of my own trip that Nick and I just took in September to Switzerland, Italy, and on the famous Bernina Express. There's a few different parts of this trip that I specifically want to overview. I think the Bernina Express is the part I want to review the most because I have so many people who have reached out to me asking about the details of this part of our trip. I'm also going to review our business class flight that we took from Toronto to Montreal and then Montreal to Zurich, Switzerland, the first section on Air Canada, and then our second section through Swiss Air. Now, we did not pay cash for these flights. We booked all of our flights for this trip using points. And if you listen to episode 9 of season 1, you'll hear all about how Nick and I optimize point collecting to help fund the flights for our travel. Next, I'm going to quickly talk about our time in Switzerland. We were only there for a quick day. We saw Zurich. We ended up taking a train to a town, the oldest town in Switzerland called Chur. And then we stayed overnight there because that's where we started our adventure the following day on the Bernina Express. I'll quickly review the Bernina Express, and then we'll talk about our few nights that we spent in Lake Como, just outside of the town of Varenna. And in the end, I'll very briefly just talk about our trip to southern Italy, where we spent 4 nights in Ischia, we spent 3 nights in Naples, and then we left from Naples and flew back to Toronto. So let's start by talking about our flight to Zurich. We have always wanted to fly business class to Europe. We never have before. I think this was certainly an experience we'll never forget. I don't know if this is an experience we're going to get to do often. I'd like to think so, but it's certainly not an experience that we would pay for, nor at this stage of life can afford to pay for. We were very fortunate that when we were flying our Toronto to Montreal leg of this flight with Air Canada, that our plane actually got upgraded from a narrow body plane to a wide body plane. So we got to fly in the pods for our second time ever from Toronto to Montreal. If you're flying Air Canada or many Star Alliance airlines, they depart from Terminal 1, where you'll see WestJet, Transat, and other airlines typically departing from Terminal 3. At Toronto Pearson Airport, there is a train that takes you between terminals. If for whatever reason you end up in the wrong terminal, it comes very frequently, every few minutes. Years ago, I worked for a company called S-Trip, which many people in Ontario and across Canada know as a company that used to take students from North America to various destinations, either within North America, occasionally in the Caribbean. And I used to work the airport where I would be coordinating and ensuring that every group was at the right gate for each of their flights. And I used to take that train all night long, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It is actually very convenient. Now, when you enter Terminal 1, the business class check-in for Air Canada is the very far right side of the terminal. It's so quick and easy. You get in, you get priority security, get in, and then we quickly went to the Maple Leaf Lounge. The food there is honestly very subpar. I think it's the experience of having unlimited coffee, having unlimited food. You do have a shower. If you enter the Maple Leaf Lounge, instead of going to the left where the food is and there's a big open space, if you go to the right, there's often a quieter area there if you actually need to work or if you're looking for a place that's a bit more serene. But in general, the domestic Maple Leaf Lounge in Terminal 1 is busy. Is it worth the busy? I think if you have the passes, it's definitely worth it because you don't have to pay for food and drinks elsewhere. There is alcohol as well if I think it's past 11 a.m. But we much prefer if you go downstairs right after you enter security and you go to the Air Canada Cafe. The Air Canada Cafe has a whole wall of grab-and-go food. They have a cool cafe bar with a whole bunch of different coffee options. We typically find it's quieter. It's got a bit of like a moody, modern vibe. And it's just a place that we prefer to have a coffee or wait for our flights over the Maple Leaf Lounge. Now, when we flew to Montreal, we had the complete opposite experience where we found the Air Canada Cafe in the Montreal airport was really small and congested and busy. But then once we got through to the international portion and we got to Maple Leaf Lounge internationally, that was beautiful. The food was incredible. We were able to sit and watch the airplanes take off and land, which we like airplanes. My husband loves airplanes. He's a bit of an airplane nerd. He likes to airplane spot and track all the planes. So the view was nice. The bar is nice. It was not busy. We were flying at 4:00 in the afternoon, which was one of the first international flights. There's a flood of people that go to the international lounge in Montreal and Toronto in the evening because of all the European flights. But we got there first. It was quiet and we actually really enjoyed ourselves. Now, the biggest benefit to booking this flight was absolutely, without a doubt, our business class flight from Montreal to Zurich. Our trip was not very long. It was just under 2 weeks, and we wanted to maximize our time. So when we had the ability to book a lie-down business class seat, we thought that it would be a really great opportunity to see if we could actually get some sleep and try and optimize our one day we were spending in Zurich. Now, Swissair, all I've ever heard was incredible things about the food and the service. And honestly, that's exactly what I can report myself. The food was incredible. I think I had the best fish I've ever had on an airplane. I got like this white cod. It was incredible. They have a signature drink. They were serving actual champagne. They had nice wine. I honestly thought the food and drink was just as good as a restaurant on land. Now, Swissair is about to switch the configuration of many of their long-haul, wide-body business class seats. We were in the old configuration on the A330 on their LX87 route, and it is definitely dated in terms of a hard product. The beds are side by side, so you don't get a whole section to yourself like you do with the pods, but you do still get to fully lie down. Now, I don't know if it's because the flight didn't seem like it was that long. Our flight from Montreal to Zurich only was 6.5 hours. So by the time we got on the plane, enjoyed our drink, had our dinner, we were already, in essence, like halfway there. So we only had like 2 to 3 hours to sleep. And I can report I slept 0 minutes on that flight, which was so disappointing, only for the fact that we were really excited at the opportunity to try and be able to sleep on an airplane. I think Nick maybe slept for like an hour total. But unfortunately, no sleep was to be had. This is where the absolute most clutch thing about Swiss business comes in. They have an arrivals lounge, which not only has lie-down private sleeping rooms, it also has these big shower rooms so you can shower. There's a big sink so you can like clean up. It has like a spa vibe. There's like a waterfall. You walk into the lounge and, man, would you like help with your bag? There's a bar, there's food. It was honestly the most incredible part of flying Swiss business. If you're flying to Zurich, if you need to have some rest, the rooms are available until they close at 1 p.m. You can rent a sleeping room as long as you like. We just rented the room for about an hour because we only had the day in Zurich and we already had a train booked from Zurich to Chur later in the afternoon. So we just like wanted to have like a quick hour nap. I honestly was so high on adrenaline, I didn't even really sleep that well at that point, but I think it was enough to get me through our quick day in Zurich. Now, we were in Zurich the middle of September. It was not super warm. It was raining. It was maybe 15 degrees. Just a quick brief summary of what we did. We did take the train from the airport to the main train station in Zurich. They have lockers there, which are on the first level below the main concourse. You can rent a locker of varying sizes for the day. So convenient if you have luggage, which we had. I think it cost us like 10 euros to leave a bag. There's a big enough locker that you can put a full-size suitcase. Highly recommend if you're traveling and you just need to drop off your bag. I will say I found the train system in Zurich awfully complicated. Maybe it's because I hadn't slept. They do their train ticketing based on zones as opposed to from one stop to another. So you do have to know in advance what zone you're going for because that's what determines your fare. There's also multiple trains, so you don't actually buy a ticket for a train. You buy a ticket for a specific fare zone. So my biggest tip, if you are planning on flying into Zurich and taking the train, is just do a little bit of research in advance. There is a lot of people who are very confused. They obviously do have a ticket office, and most people there speak English. Once we got to Zurich itself, we really just spent the whole day walking around. We had a train at 4 o'clock that I had booked months in advance from Zurich Central Station to Chur, which was about an hour. If you didn't see my conversation with Christina in episode 8 of the podcast where she talks about Swiss trains, there is a reduction in the price of trains if you book in advance. I do highly recommend considering it because Swiss trains can be quite expensive. If you book in advance, there is an early saver discount. So it saved us about 50% on our total fare. And I believe our actual tickets ended up being about 25 francs, which is almost $50 a ticket. Now, if you use that same conversion, that 1 franc is equal to 2 Canadian dollars, you'll also understand that anything in francs is double the price in Canadian. And we've heard that Switzerland is expensive, but when we started going on our walk around Zurich and stopped to get our first cappuccino, and the price was 8 francs, you can believe that we were not drinking very much coffee that day. In fact, we went to this very famous cafe called Café and Conditori, which is in the Old District. It's the oldest cafe in Zurich. It was beautiful. We sat on the terrace. I got a little tuna toast and Nick got a brioche. We had our cappuccinos. Besides that, we didn't eat much there because we did find the cost of things was quite high. We even went to a store at one point and we saw a can of Twisted Tea. A 350 milliliter can of Twisted Tea, which in Canada, for reference, would be about $2.50. There was 6 francs for one. So it's $12 for a can of Twisted Tea. So things there were quite expensive, especially with our not super strong Canadian dollar. We did go to a local market. We spent a lot of time walking around the Limmat River, which connects to Lake Zurich. We also ended up going to the Viaduct. The Aqueduct Market is this cool dining and shopping complex where they preserve this like historic railway, but then incorporated small businesses underneath it. I do highly recommend visiting it if you're in Zurich, as well as finishing up like we did at Frau Gerolds Garden, which is not far from the Aqueduct Market. Frau Gerolds Garden is like a beer garden we've been to in Germany. It's beautiful. There's different vendors. The weather wasn't great, but it was a way that we could be outside. We did get 2 beers and a sausage. It did cost like $50, but it was absolutely a way I would have wanted to spend my afternoon in Zurich. It was right beside the train station, so right after we were able to take the train back to Zurich Central Station to get our bags, and then ultimately make it to our train that was taking us to Chur at 4 o'clock that afternoon. We did find finding our train in the Zurich train station a bit confusing. We had to ask a few people because although we had a train number on our ticket, we couldn't find that anywhere on the board. So if you have any questions, just go to the information desk at Zurich train station. We were able to catch our train and made it to Chur around 5:30, where we went to our hotel, dropped off our bags, and enjoyed our evening in the oldest town in Switzerland. Now, Chur itself sits in southeastern Switzerland. It's right on the edge of the Alps, and it's most popularly known for not only being the oldest town in Switzerland, but also being one of the starting points of the Bernina Express train. Now, we took the Bernina Express in September, but we booked our tickets in April. And here it looks like for a second, class ticket on the Bernina Express, we paid 100 francs with taxes each. Now, if you're staying in Chur to take the Bernina Express, there is definitely a few recommendations I have for you. We ate dinner at Werkstatt Chur, which was actually phenomenal. It's a cool cocktail bar. They host events in the evenings. The food was actually fantastic. They do have a rotating specials menu every week, and we had this like incredible beef dish we shared. We also just got some local cheese and crackers. Their cocktails were very good. I am not a huge drinker. I enjoy wine in some quantities. My preference has always been good quality cocktails, and I found that this was one of the best places we had cocktails on our entire trip. We also went to a cafe called Café Clash, which was halfway between where we stayed at the Three Kings Hotel and the Chur train station. Now, the Chur train station is super well located. It's right in town. The town is actually prohibitive of cars in many areas, so there's a lot of people walking around. And the Three Kings Hotel where we stayed, Draconish, I think is how you say it in Swiss, was only a 10-minute walk, and Café Clash was right in the middle. Nick, my husband, who is a coffee connoisseur, especially since this trip, which I'll get into later, he found that this coffee was the best coffee he had on the whole trip. So not only was the place where we got some of our best cocktails, not only was it a place where we got some of the best coffee, only was it a place that we got the best food, it also was one of our favorite towns because it seemed the least touristy. It seemed very authentic. This oldest town in Switzerland still had a lot of its original architecture. It's in the mountains. The views were beautiful. I really do recommend that if you have the opportunity to stay in Chur before the Bernina Express, that you take the train from Zurich and do it. It is also such a smart way to actually travel from Switzerland to Italy, because not only are the views beautiful, but you actually get to see and experience what a smaller town Switzerland looks like. So for anyone who's planning on going from Switzerland south to Italy, I do highly recommend considering staying in Chur and taking the Bernina Express on your next trip. After our quick 24 hours in Switzerland, we finally got to go on the Bernina Express. And let me tell you, if you're a train nerd, if you like good views, if you like learning, if you like experiences, the Bernina Express is absolutely for you. The Bernina Express takes you from Chur south into Italy. It actually ascends up into the mountain range and then back down, ending almost at the top of Lake Como. So it did make the next portion of our trip a bit of a natural consequence of us wanting to go on the train. The train itself actually has two sections. There's the Bernina Express tourist portion of the train, but there is also a local portion of the train, which many people talk about on Reddit, where you can go on the exact same train path, the exact same train line. You just don't have the same big open windows or the same audio guide as you would have if you're in the tourist portion of the train. And I've heard that the cost is significantly less. If you're someone considering going on this train just for the opportunity to see the views, I would consider checking to see what the cost of the commuter portion of the train would be in relation to the Bernina Express tourist portion of the train. Literally, the train cars are connected. We sat in a second class coach, and I walked through the full train. I walked through the first class portion, and I did not honestly notice much of a difference between first and second class. I mean, in first class, they have a 2-1 configuration. In second class, they have a 2-2 configuration. They do say there is a better side of the train to sit on. If you're going from Chur down south, you want to be sitting on the right side of the train or the west side of the train. But unfortunately, when you're actually booking your ticket, it won't tell you which side's going to be the east side and the west side. So you are at the mercy a little bit of luck. When we got onto the train, there was no one sitting on the west side windows. So the person who was running the Bernina Express actually just told us, sit on the other side, and if the people come, we'll move you back on your actual seats, but for now you can sit on the better view side. Honestly, I found the views on both sides beautiful. The Bernina Express is floor-to-ceiling windows. You get to see incredible valleys. You get to see incredible mountains, waterfalls. Honestly, it was one of the biggest highlights of our trip for sure. If you're someone who enjoys learning, the Bernina Express has an incredible free audio tour that you can listen to, where at different checkpoints along the train line, it talks about the railways, the actual history of the area. It talks about some of the geology of the area, how the mountains affect the Rhine River, which actually comes from Switzerland and then goes down into Germany. We are honestly slightly nerdy and love learning about all these types of things. So for that reason alone, we really appreciated taking the Bernina Express as a learning opportunity to familiarize ourselves with some of the history and natural wonders of the area. Something I will say about the Bernina Express is they do have a cafe on board, but they don't actually come around and ask you if you want anything. So you do have to go kind of find the people in the food area of the train to ask. So they will present a menu to you when you get on the train. Just so you know, you do have to go and ask for something though in the small area. It's not even its own train car. It's like a small section in like one of the middle train cars. For those of you who are using the Bernina Express as a vessel for transportation just as much as they are for an experience, there is also lots of space for luggage, so you don't have to worry about bringing bags. There was no shortage of space when we were starring our own. The views from the Bernina Express are absolutely incredible. You see beautiful green valleys, those traditional small Swiss villages in green space with the mountains in the background. There is some blue lakes. There is some areas as you got more higher up into the mountains that were a little bit more bare, but had their own kind of special, feel to them. I do highly recommend if you're someone who not only loves trains, but certainly loves just like sightseeing and views. I'm someone who loves the mountains. One of my favorite places I've ever been is actually in Canada, in British Columbia. I highly recommend if you're a mountain person to do the Bernina Express. It is certainly something beautiful and one of those experiences that is just once in a lifetime. I will say as an aside, if you're someone who's done the Bernina Express or is familiar with this area of the Alps, I do have a hot take that I think the British Columbia, Alberta mountains are perhaps just a little bit more beautiful. When we were on this train ride, of course, the views are outstanding. It's nothing like I've ever seen before, but there is something about the Canadian Rockies that has a special place in my heart. And I don't think it's just because I'm from Canada. I actually think it is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Maybe in a future time, I'll review Nick and I's trip to Whistler. We've also been to Calgary, Lake Louise. There's something just so incredible about the glacier blue lakes of Western Canada in the mountains that I think is absolutely worth seeing. And if you're someone who's seen these mountains and wants to see something even more beautiful, I do highly, highly recommend going to Western Canada, go to the Rocky Mountains. It will take your breath away and is absolutely worth a visit. Now, as I mentioned, the Bernina Express line actually ends in a town in northern Italy called Tirano. Now, there is another portion of the Bernina Express that you can take from St. Moritz to Tirano, which is shorter in length. When you take the longer version, like we did from Chur to Tirano, you actually pass St. Moritz. So you get to see more portions of this train line. I don't know how to get to St. Moritz. I literally know nothing about that portion of it. I know many people do it. Many of the YouTube videos I saw before or the reels were specifically from St. Moritz. So if that's something you'd like to do, that is more up in the mountains. I highly recommend looking into it, but I don't have a lot of information about that portion specifically. I also know that you can take the train in either direction. So you can also take the train from Tirano in northern Italy to St. Moritz or to Chur. One of the reasons why this trip was so appealing to us is because Tirano itself is in the end of the kind of most northwestern train line in Italy. And when you actually get on the train line at that location, that train goes to the closest big city, which is Milan. And along that passageway, which is about 2 hours, is Lake Como. So this train line that takes you from Tirano, where the Bernina Express ends, actually goes south into Italy and right along Lake Como takes you into Milan. This is part of the reason we ended up going to Lake Como in the first place, because literally it is so convenient to go from one train to the other. And on the eastern side of Lake Como, where this train line is a town that many people know on Lake Como called Varenna. Now, when we were looking at accommodations in Varenna, I would say the average accommodation was between 400 to 600 Canadian dollars a night, and that was just a little outside of our price range. So we actually stayed in a town on the hill beside Varenna called Vezio, which I highly, highly recommend either Vezio or looking at Perledo if you're planning on doing this area of Lake Como. There's two reasons why. The first is that it is close to Varenna, and there is a free night bus that runs every night and takes you from the train station in Varenna up into the hills to Perledo and Vezio, so you have transportation back to those towns. The second is that Lake Como is situated in the southern part of this alpine range. So it is very mountainous and very hilly. And when you're on top of the hills, you actually have some of the most beautiful views of Lake Como itself. Where we stayed in Vezio, there's a few small cafes and bars, and honestly, the views from up on the hill are literally breathtaking. We have been to quite a few places in Italy. We've been to Cinque Terre, Rome, Florence, been to Tuscany. On this trip, we also went to Ischia and Naples, and by far and away, Lake Como is the most beautiful place I have ever been in Italy. If you're actually looking from south to north on the lake, in the background, you can see mountains. And when it's sunny and beautiful out and the lake is crystal clear, there's nothing more incredible than a beautiful lake beside a beautiful mountain. Varenna itself was a very cute town. We were there, as I mentioned, in the middle of September. I was shocked that it wasn't busier than it was. We did have to wait a little bit of time to take the ferry, but we were also traveling around on a Sunday. We thankfully didn't get affected by ferry strikes at all. Thank goodness, because from Varenna, you are able to take the ferry directly to Bellagio or Menagio, which are all kind of in a triangle around the lake together. And the ferry from Varenna to Bellagio is about 20 minutes. Bellagio itself was busier than Varenna when we visited. I would still say it is nowhere close to as busy as other places we have been to Italy in less touristy times. Once again, I was shocked it wasn't busier. We were there September 13th, 14th, 15th. We loved Bellagio and Varenna. We found both of them to be beautiful. We love walking just like around these towns, up and down staircases, looking at small little businesses. Both Varenna and Bellagio are quite hilly. So if you're someone who has physical restrictions, just be mindful. There are opportunities for you to travel to these places, but you do have to understand that there are many places that are just not accessible other than by walking up and down stairs. A few quick recommendations in Bellagio and Varenna. We did go to a wine bar in Bellagio we really liked. It's called Enoteca Cava Turacciolo, and it's on one of those staircases that I was talking about. You just like sit on the side of the staircase. They bring you wine. They have this gigantic wine book, either by the bottle or by the glass. We also had some local to the region cheese, and we watched this Jet2 holiday moment that I just had way too much empathy for these people to record. As I mentioned, these areas are hilly. In order to access many places in Varenna and Bellagio, you need to be able to walk up and down a dozen, 2 dozen, sometimes 3 dozen steep stairs. This group of seniors were staying at an accommodation that was halfway up this 100-stair staircase that we were sitting on, and we watched as they were trying to like carry their bags up because they had like 2 bags each. Now people are trying to help them, but they just have so much stuff. Please, if you are going to Italy, especially this area of Italy, be mindful that if you're traveling with a lot of bags and there's a lot of stairs, it's going to be really, really difficult for you to get around. So try and pack light and don't be a reel of a Jet2 holiday. I really wanted to go to this restaurant called La Scarpetta in Varenna, but the line was too long and they had very short hours. So if I could go back in time, I would have gone to La Scarpetta. We went to another place that I'm not going to mention, that the food was probably the most mid I had on my entire trip. Otherwise, if you are looking for something a bit more fine dining, we had Nick's birthday dinner at a restaurant called La Sera Bistro, which was actually in Vezio, right beside our accommodation. We got the table d'hôte, which was maybe $150 a person, but we're talking incredible, incredible fine dining, food. The views were literally breathtaking. It sits on the hill because it was next to our accommodation, overlooking Lake Como. If you're someone who's staying in Varenna, they offer a shuttle service where they'll take you up to the restaurant and bring you back down. I highly, highly recommend going to La Serra Bistro. They actually do keep their tasting menu equilibrium secret. So if you have any food sensitivities, allergies, or anything you dislike, you can just let them know. We also did the wine pairing with the meal, which was fantastic. I did find it was a lot of alcohol that I drank that night in addition to my Negroni. But we had a fantastic meal, and I couldn't have asked for a better meal for Nick's 33rd birthday. La Serra Bistro itself is actually located in an agriturismo, which, if you haven't watched any of my other episodes, an agriturismo is an accommodation style in Italy, which is an active winery or farm that also acts as a hotel. Picture an old Tuscan farmhouse vibe. Some of them are modern, new, and chic, and some of them are rustic and authentic feeling. An agriturismo is a great experience if you're staying in Italy and you want a more traditional vibe in your accommodation. We didn't stay at Castello di Vezio, which is connected to La Serra Bistro, but if you are someone who's traveling to Italy, I do highly recommend looking into staying in an agriturismo. We did stay in one once when we were in San Gimignano in Tuscany, and it was one of the hotel experiences we still talk about to this day. We absolutely loved it. Doesn't get better than like a truly authentic Italian experience. Something I haven't mentioned yet about this trip is that we actually had to take a bus when we were taking this train line because the train was under construction for the Milano Cortina Olympics. And unfortunately, the bus situation was not great. The day we were actually supposed to be taking this train line back to Milan so we could take a high-speed train to southern Italy was the first day the train reopened in over 4 months. When we made it to the platform before our train at 7:30 a.m., we were accompanied by dozens of people who were waiting for trains that were over 2 hours delayed. When you buy a train ticket in Italy, you do buy a train ticket for a specific train at a specific time. So we had already bought our train ticket in advance for a train that was supposed to be in 15 minutes, but was running over 2 hours late. And we had a high-speed train to catch, which cost us a few $100s each from Milan to Naples. So we unfortunately had to risk it for the biscuit and jump on one of these earlier trains that we did not have a ticket for. Thank you, God, there was not a person on there who was checking people's tickets. I'm sure we could have talked our way out of having to pay it since the trains were 2 hours behind, but we chose to take the 5:30 a.m. train that showed up at 7:45 because our train would not have gotten us to Milan on time. If you ever find yourself in the Milan train station, we went to Mercato Centrale in the train station, and we highly, highly recommend visiting if you are there. We went to the Rome location when we were in Italy in 2019, and think of it as a upscale food court that has multiple different vendors that sell a very specific product, whether it's baked goods, they sell fish, they sell meat, they sell pizza prepared, they sell pasta prepared or just fresh to buy to go home. But we've always found the vendors in there just so good. In the night, they actually have like a bar. But if you're going to be in the Milan train station, if you're going to be in the Rome train station, go to Mercato Centrale for your food or drink. I don't think you'll be disappointed. In the future, I would actually like spend more time in Milan. We were literally just there for 2 hours between our train from Lake Como to Milan before we took our high-speed train from Milan to Naples. And that train was something we were also looking forward to on this trip because we've never taken a true high-speed train before. If you're from Europe, I'm sure you probably think it's crazy that North Americans have never taken a high-speed train before, and that's just because we don't have them. But there's something crazy about traveling at 295 kilometers an hour, which is the speed that I recorded us going between Milan and Rome. It's so efficient. Our tickets weren't super expensive. They were expensive enough we didn't want to miss the train because we didn't want to have to pay for new tickets. But what an efficient way to get around. These trains operate all the time. There were stops in Rome and Florence along the way. I think it's such a cool opportunity if you're someone who likes trains. If you haven't already figured it out, We like trains. My husband in particular, he's a plane and automobile guy. So for him, this was a great experience, and it was a great way and simple way for us to travel from northern Italy to the hot, 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 hot mid-September southern Italy. We have already talked about Naples and Ischia at length in this podcast. If you go to episodes 11 and 12 of season 1, I talk with Al about her time in Italy. So I'm not going to spend super long here, but I am going to talk about a few of our biggest highlights. First of all, if you're someone who's considering going to Ischia, this place is an absolute gem. Not only is it not super touristy, it also has incredible seafood. Nick had seafood pasta every single night. And every single night it kept getting better. I don't know what it is they do with the pasta there. I think they cook the pasta itself in like the water they boil the seafood in, because the pasta itself has like this incredible seafood flavor. I'm sorry if you don't like seafood, but if you are someone who likes seafood, Ischia is a place you really should consider traveling to. I said it wasn't overly touristy, but it definitely still has like a vibe. It's vibrant every single night. There's people walking around. The passeggiata. Every night, the people of these towns are like walking around the streets, getting gelato, hanging with their families. It's such an incredible place, not only to visit, but I could definitely imagine anyone wanting to live. These people are just a part of their community. They're immersed in their own culture, and it was really, really fun to be a part of that. We stayed just outside of Ischia, Porto, so we would actually take the bus like 3 stops every time we wanted to go get food. I do find the bus system was actually quite easy there. Maybe it's because we were right close to the bus terminal. We bought a 3-day pass. Every time we got on the bus, we just had the pass. The first time you go on the bus, you do have to stamp the pass, but at that point, you just have to carry it around with you. So we would take our pass, we would go to the bus terminal, and we'd either go to Ischia Porto or we would take the bus to other places around the island. We actually found it really, really convenient. When we were in Ischia, they actually had Ischia Porto Fest, which was such a cool experience. Everyone in town came downtown. There was fireworks. There was this big show. Nick and I will never forget us standing around the bay of the port, watching this incredible show in the actual small port area. We were standing behind thousands of local people, thousands of people, and it truly was like a one-in-a-lifetime authentic Italian experience. They had local food, they had local entertainers. It felt like everyone in the whole island had converged just in this one town for this one evening. A few very notable places to mention that we went to in Ischia. We really enjoyed the Empomeo bar, which is in Ischia Porto. It's not right on the port itself. It's like 1 or 2 blocks on one of the main streets. I love a good cocktail. Give me a cocktail. Give me a cocktail menu that has like different vibes of cocktails. I'm all about it. It's right on the corner of the main street. Sit on the side of the road, watch the world go by. Highly recommend Bar Empomeo in Ischia Porto. I also really enjoyed Taverna Antonio, which is right on the port. There's a series of about 20 restaurants that are right on the port in Ischia, and Antonio literally was there every day. People would walk by, "Hey, Antonio, ciao, Antonio." Like, he knew everyone in this town. And the first night we were there, we got a table. I got a fried seafood dish. Nick got his first seafood pasta. And I don't know, there's something about going to a place like this where everyone in town knows the owner that makes you know that it is the place to be. We also spared no expense having the Rucolino Amaro every single night after dinner. It is actually very, very, very good. I'm not a huge liquor person. I certainly don't drink grappa. I can handle or enjoy occasionally limoncello, but Rucolino has officially become my favorite digestive. Highly recommend if you're in Italy or if you find it at any alcohol store to purchase a small bottle. You will not be disappointed. The absolute, without a doubt, biggest recommendation I have for anyone going to Ischia is to visit the Poseidon thermal gardens. If you're someone who enjoys thermal baths or going to a spa, this place is incredible. In North America, we do have a bit of a Scandinavian spa culture, but this thermal garden is kind of like that, but more with a hot summer side of the Mediterranean, side of an inactive volcano, mountainous vibe. Just like many other thermal spas, there are multiple baths of varying temperatures. There's a specific order in which you're supposed to go to each of the baths. We followed the thermal cycle recommended. They actually have a sauna in the side of the mountain, which is heated by the volcanic heat from this old volcano. Like, all of the pools are naturally heated. I can't believe the side of the cave sauna is naturally heated. Like, you have to do it to understand. It's all fresh mineral water. By time you're done the thermal cycle, I've literally never been so relaxed in my life. I think there was 18 pools, and by the time you're at the very top, because the pools do kind of, as you go through the cycle, they like go higher and higher and higher up this mountain. You're just lying there with this view of the Mediterranean, these beautiful palm trees. You're floating in like this lightly mineralized salt water. One thing I will say though is, because all of these pools are natural mineral water, you are not allowed to wear sunscreen, and you do have to wear a cap for your hair so you don't get your hair products in the water. Be very careful. I had the worst sunburn because I was fully exposed to the sun. It was the middle of September. So be mindful if you're someone who is sensitive to the sun. It is probably worthwhile wearing a UV shirt, maybe UV pants. Definitely make sure you get a spot underneath an umbrella for when you're not in the pools, but many of the pools are not covered by any shade. It also had incredible food that was very reasonably priced. There is a wine bar that is up in the side of the volcanic mountain as well. Once again, these places aren't the most accessible if you have physical restrictions, but if you are someone who is okay with walking, it's maybe 3 or 4 stories up into the mountain. It is a part of the spa grounds, and the wine bar, once again, overlooks the thermal gardens, overlooks the mountain, and overlooks the Mediterranean. I cannot express to you how relaxing it was. I would recommend Poseidon Thermal Gardens to anyone who is in Naples, and absolutely for sure if you're visiting Ischia. Our last stop on this fantastic trip from Switzerland along the Bernina Express and then into Italy was in Naples, and my gosh, is Naples an incredible, incredible city to visit. I think it gets such a bad rap. We absolutely loved it. And there's a few things I certainly think you should know if you're visiting yourself. The first is that our absolute favorite accommodation that we stayed at on this trip was the Mansardu Value Bed and Breakfast, which is located in the Spanish Quarter in Naples. This is an accommodation in a local apartment building. They have the top floor, I think it's the 5th floor of this apartment building. There's 3 bedrooms, there's a shared kitchen space, but there's also a private terrace. It is located right beside the Toledo Metro, but it is also located right in the thick of it in the Spanish Quarter. When we were coming home at night, there were hundreds of people all night long in the Spanish Quarter. If you're someone who's looking for a relaxing time in Naples, perhaps not the accommodation you'd like. However, if you're someone who wants to be in the thick of it, wants to be social, wants to be where the locals are, this is where the people are all night long. And let me tell you, there are people out at Naples all night long. We did go to Gino e Sorbio, and we also went to Da Michele's for pizza. And honestly, yes, they're both good. Perhaps they're both worth going to, but Di Michele's was the better pizza by far. We did wait an hour. Be mindful if you're going to Di Michele's and you're taking takeout pizza, there is a line that wraps around the outside of the building. If you're going to Gino e Sorbio's, you walk inside, you go to the desk, you order your pizza. Don't just stand around and not know what you're doing. There's hundreds of people there. Either ask somebody who already has a pizza or go inside and ask someone who's working there. If you're taking takeout, which line do I go into? They also do have sit-in tables if you'd like to sit in and eat. That is a separate line. So just be mindful when you arrive at these places. First of all, find out what line is for what. Second, make sure you're in the right space. Don't be afraid to ask someone for help. Literally everyone speaks English. I know I talked a lot about works at Chur in Switzerland, but another highlight bar was absolutely L'Antiquario bar in Naples. This has a speakeasy vibe. It's in the top 50 rated worldwide bars, and we loved our experience there. The drinks were great. It has such a cool alchemist type vibe. We really enjoyed it. Highly recommend if you're into cool upscale cocktails. We did have a teachable moment when we were flying back from Naples to Canada. Unfortunately, the night we went out with this group of Italian people, we got back to our room around 1:30 and we had to be up at 6. And we had had a few glasses of wine. In the morning, we still had not packed. So at 6 a.m., Nick and I are throwing all of our stuff in our bag. We have to take the metro to the main train station, to take a bus to the airport. And let's just say Nick accidentally put all of the Rucolino and some of the wine we had bought into his carry-on bag. Thankfully, after we checked our bags and when we went through security, although they found all of these liquids that were bigger than 100 mils, they allowed Nick to go back and check his backpack full of liquor and Rucolino. We were very concerned that it was going to shatter and break, but thank you, Air Canada, for not shattering all of our liquor and some of our ceramic goods that we had bought in. It actually made its way all the way back to Canada in one piece. It just goes to show, though, that sometimes well-traveled people make mistakes too. We have traveled plenty of times. My husband knows very well that you cannot put liquids into a carry-on bag, but in the moment, sometimes things happen. Don't be too hard on yourselves. The worst that can happen is you just ask to recheck a bag. Be easy on yourself, people. Traveling is supposed to be fun. Yes, we all make mistakes. I accidentally had a knife in my bag in Berlin once that I forgot from a wine and cheese event that we went to, and it got thrown out. Whatever. They knew I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. My final tip for Naples is that we actually did a free Rick Steves walking tour that was available through the Rick Steves app. I highly recommend doing it. It is a great way to see Naples. Once again, very nerdy, love history, love learning. We thought this was a great way to, for free, share an audio tour. It takes about 2 hours. We learned all about the history of Naples being Greek, then being Roman, and then ultimately becoming a part of Italy in 1860s. Like, Italy's only that old. So highly recommend the Rick Steves walking tour. Also, check Rick Steves walking tours in general if you're going anywhere in Europe. He has some great content. We also did their Acropolis tour a few years ago when we were in Greece. It's a great resource for $0. Other tips to know, Italy is really hot, especially in southern Italy in September. Northern Italy was not. So if you're going to northern Italy in September, make sure to pack for hotter midday temperatures and cooler evenings. In southern Italy, it was hot all the time. It was still 30 to 35 degrees Celsius during the day. Even at night, it was still hot. So be mindful if you're doing activities during the day in southern Italy, even in September, it's still going to be really warm. We also used an eSIM on this trip called Airlo. They're not a sponsor of the podcast, but I really found that it was great pricing wise, but also in connectivity. I didn't have any issues at all in Switzerland or Italy. I bought specifically a package for Switzerland for 24 hours, and then I bought a specific 7-day Italy pass. I think in total it cost me maybe $20 for both of them. And that was cheaper than getting a SIM card. I think eSIMs really are the best way to get Wi-Fi at this point in time if you're a traveler. So check out Airlo. There are a lot of influencers who have codes to get a certain percentage or a dollar amount off your first time using it. So I do highly recommend you using Airlo as an eSIM for your next trip. Otherwise, I'm going to end with this recommendation, and this is something we talked about a lot in season 1. Sometimes traveling deeper is better than traveling to more places. I did find this trip was a little bit too high tempo for us. We are currently in the midst of planning our trip to Greece next September with a group of friends because we're going for a wedding, but we're also trying to figure out where our next adventure is going to be. And one of the things I am going to keep in mind is trying to slow down, trying to spend more time in places. I do not like being rushed. I like to really explore deeply. So for our next trip, I think I'm going to take my own advice and just take a little bit more time than perhaps I intentionally planned to begin with. That being said, we are currently in the process of figuring out where we want to go. We have a strong interest in going to Croatia. We haven't spent a lot of time in Spain. We've never been to Portugal. We're also thinking about going to some other Greek islands. We went on a Greek island cruise in 2022. We've spent some time on the mainland. We're thinking about going to Crete. So if anyone has any recommendations, look, just because I create travel content doesn't mean I don't appreciate getting information from listeners. So once again, if you have any recommendations for approximately 7 days in Europe in middle of September, send me a message on Wander Everyday Pod. And let me take this time to plug the pod in general. I mean, at this point, I think I've reviewed most of our trip. I am more than happy to answer any questions about Switzerland, the Bernina Express, Italy, or any other trip that I've done. Message me once again, Wander Everyday Pod. You can also follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. I'm on TikTok at Wander Everyday Pod as well. And I hope that you maybe found some insight today that is helpful for planning your next trip to Italy or Switzerland. Guys, I'm so happy that we're back for season 2. I cannot wait to share more adventures with you. Coming up in the next few weeks, we're going back to Japan on a solo trip of a first-time visitor. We're going to be doing an episode where we're reviewing the absolute must-know tips about going to Disney World in Florida from a Disney World expert herself. We're also going to be going to Slovenia, we're going to England, and we're going to be going to Indonesia to Bali. I cannot wait to share all of these fun, exciting stories and adventures with you. Until next time, happy wandering.